Howdy, hey, hi, and hello everybody. Today we'll be talking about the different kinds of tissues that there are and their functions. So there are three main types of tissues. I stand corrected, there's four main types of tissues in the body. There's epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous. The first one that we're going to be going over is epithelial tissue. This is the stuff that makes up your skin and lines your body's cavities. So we will begin with the different shapes that the epithelial tissue can be. So the one that I have before me is squamous. There's different levels of tissue. So this is simple, and it's going to only have one layer of those cells. And because squamous, as you might remember it by, it's squishy, they don't really have a defined shape, they're flexible. This is going to be one of the most porous level types of epithelial tissue, and it's going to be easier for other things to get in and out of. And then this is going to be stratified epithelial, squamous. So you've got our first layer here, which might look a little bit more boxy, but as you can see, as we go up, it gets more spread out and loose, and that's just how squamous tissue works. It's a little funny.
That's a little funny.
Next up, we have cuboidal. It's a very original name, as you might think, for something that is quite literally, it's cubes, it's squares. That's the easiest way to remember this type of tissue, and it doesn't really squish, doesn't move around too much. There's only a few places in the body where you're going to find simple cuboidal. However, stratified cuboidal is also not going to be super common, but when it is there, it's not going to be a whole bunch of stacks like the squamous. It's going to have fewer layers. And these are very blown up models in the body. These are going to be far more concentrated. And last but certainly not least, we have columnar. As you can hear in the beginning there, column. So there it's just a bunch of little columns, just like that. These are just taller than the cuboidal. And then stratified, it's going to look also a little funnier. You might start to think it's squamous in some places, but I assure you that if it looks like this, it's going to be columnar. There is a fourth and ever elusive type of epithelial tissue called transitional, which is going to look like columnar, combined with squamous, combined with cuboidal. It's a whole mess, and there's going to be only one place in the body where you find this type of tissue, and that's going to be the bladder, because it needs to be able to stretch and shrink as, you drink or move on from there. Gone over our epithelial tissues, next is going to be the connective tissues. So there's going to be some of the ones here that you might be more familiar with, such as cartilage, embryonic, or maybe even adipose, but there's more than that. There is also areolar, dense, osseous, and vascular. So some of those probably have some familiar sounding words, but we'll elaborate on that a little bit. So in order here, we're going to start with embryonic and areolar. So embryonic tissue, you might kind of hear the word embryo in there, which is fetal tissue, essentially. That's the building blocks for the rest of the cells in the body. Your bones, your organs, the rest of your cells. Everything is all going to start from that embryonic connective tissue, otherwise referred to as mesenchyme, the beginning tissue, if you will. And then areolar tissue is going to occur throughout the body as a filler tissue, so it's found beneath your skin, as well as mucous glands, so your nose, your eyes, that sort of stuff. Next, we have adipose and dense. So adipose is otherwise known as fat. So some people are going to have more than others. It's just a way for storage to occur in the body, as well as an energy reserve, a support and protection and insulation. So adipose tissue is very important. We do need that adipose fat in our bodies, because otherwise we would probably freeze to death. Dense connective tissue, otherwise known as the collagenous, includes your tendons and ligaments. So you've heard of the Achilles tendon. That's going to be dense connective tissue. It's what keeps that calf muscle connected to your ankle bone. Osseous and vascular. So these are some of the two that make you go, that's a connective tissue? What? Osseous. So just as the prefix site or suffix site is to cell, osseous, osseo is going to be to bone. So yes, your bones are a form of connective tissue, and they're made up of osteocytes or bone cells. And it is the only solid / non-flexible connective tissue in the body. And then the next is vascular, which we've heard of your vascular system. So your blood. It's the only fully liquid connective tissue in your body. It's what makes everything flow, supplies oxygen to the rest of the body. Cartilage. So this is the one that's going to sound the most familiar. You know, your ears are cartilage, your nose is cartilage, but what else is cartilage? I'm going to bring my painted skeleton Jeff in over here to demonstrate. The only part besides his teeth here, the only part that's not painted here, this is cartilage. That's what connects your ribs to your sternum, and this is called hyaline cartilage. And it's very important. However, your ears are in your nose, that would be an example of elastic cartilage, as well as the epiglottis and larynx, which are part of different systems. And fibrous or fibrocartilage is located in areas subject to heavy pressure and stress. So those discs, if you ever heard somebody say that they slipped a disc or somebody else they knew slipped a disc, that's the cushion in between your vertebrae that keep your spine from not doing so hot. And the internal meniscus of the knee. So if people have knee problems, it's the cartilage in there. Continuing on with tissues, we're going to get into muscles. So we have 3 types of muscles: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. So this cardiac and skeletal muscle examples here I have made out of straws painted. However, the smooth one model here is made out of clay. Each of these are going to, let's start with skeletal muscles. So these are going to be the muscles that surround your skeleton. These are the ones that you probably think of first when we think of muscles, because these are the ones that allow us to move. These ones allow us motion, as well as supporting the skeleton, keeping it where it needs to be. So skeletal muscle is, your skeletal muscles will be made up of multiple of these. So each individual straw would be the example of a myofibril, and then each of these myofibrils makes up one of these, which is going to be a fascicle, and then a whole bunch of these wrapped around each other is going to make up that whole muscle, which is going to be covered in epimysium, which is going to be that the areolar tissue that's going to keep that together. So epi, like epidermis, is going to mean outer. And then mys, M-Y-S, is going to be muscle. So just as site is to cell, mys is to muscle, epi is to outer. Got it. So that is on skeletal muscle. Next up, we have, I lied, more on skeletal muscle. So as you may or may not be able to tell, there are lines drawn along this example of skeletal muscle. And those are called striations, which is a fun way of saying stripe. This myofibril is also going to be known as a sarcomere, which is going to be made up of individual kind of interlocking cells, which is why muscles are strong enough to do what they do. And that's also what those striations are going to be, is where those muscle cells overlap and connect into each other, called a Z-line. So moving on from skeletal muscle into cardiac muscle. So cardiac, heart, this is the muscle that's going to be located in your heart. It's going to be the only place that you'll find cardiac muscle is in your cardiac region or your heart. As you can see, as you might be able to see, this type of muscle also has striations, but it looks a fair bit different. Of course, this is majorly blown up. In reality, these gaps are so close together, they're not visible with the naked eye, and you need a microscope to really be able to tell. So that's on cardiac muscle. Last but not least, we have smooth muscle. This is the type of muscle that's going to make up your organs. As you can see here, it has a very squamous shape to it. It is tapered off at the ends and has a central nucleus, which means that the nucleus is going to be towards the middle of the cell, whereas when it comes to skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, the nucleus might be really anywhere in the cell. But for smooth muscle, it's going to be more centralized. So things like your stomach, your small, large intestine, those are all going to be made out of smooth muscle tissue. Thank you for tuning in to the tissues video. If you have any questions about the epithelial, connective, nervous, or muscle tissues, please let me know in the comments. I will do my best to answer any of your questions either in the comment or I will address it in another video. The next video we'll be jumping up to organ systems, starting off with the nervous system and the integumentary system. So thank you for watching. I will see you next time.